Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Shlomo Steinmetz. I'm the support team leader at BPM Soft, and today's webinar on what's new in Sequence 6.4 will be presented by our knowledge manager, Ellie Stutz. We're going to get started, and we'll, as usual, have question intervals in the middle for Q&A. So why don't we get started, Ellie? Your move.
Unmuted.
Hi there, Shlomo, and welcome everyone. I'm Ellie Stutz, Knowledge Manager for PNM Soft, and I'll be presenting today's webinar, introducing Sequence's new features for version 6.4. Sequence version 6.4 was released just 2 weeks ago, and it includes a set of very practical features which give you increased control over your process development and execution. In this webinar, we're going to introduce each feature and understand how it will contribute to your BPM project. We'll especially devote time to Sequence's one-click action feature, which enables you to complete your tasks at the click of a link from your mobile phone. And I'll be happy to take your questions as we go along. Now you can download version 6.4 and its release notes from our Knowledge Center under the Download Center. Please refer to the Sequence 6 installation and configuration guide in the Documentation Center of the Knowledge Center for how to install the version. And you're welcome, of course, to ask questions during the course of the webinar. Let's just take a look at some of the features we'll be dealing with today. These are the new version 6.4 features: SharePoint 2010 support, rollback message configuration, sorting, expressions, workflow validation, copy-paste activity, source control management, one-click action mobile support, that's the highlight, stay tuned for that, external files deployment, and resource file management. So a lot of exciting new practical features which will give you more control and make your lives easier in your workflow development. Okay, let's start off first with SharePoint 2010. In this version of Sequence, we support installation on SharePoint 2010, all three versions: Foundation, sorry about that, Foundation, Standard, and Enterprise. The same sequenced installation supports SharePoint's version 2007 and 2010, and in addition, Sequence can be installed on SharePoint in any language. If you want to translate the Sequence runtime user interface to that language, to a different language, you can edit the resource file, and we'll speak more about the resource file later in the webinar. And as in previous versions, all the web parts can be hosted in your own SharePoint site. So here is, as you're seeing, SharePoint 2010, and we're looking at the Sequence runtime, which has been installed on it. Okay, next up, rollback message configuration. Now, Sequence enables you to notify relevant stakeholders when an unexpected change occurs in your process. Now, activity rollback, as you know, is the turning back of the clock on an activity. For example, when a mistake occurs in the filling out of a form, and when this happens, you can determine that a rollback notification is sent. By default, it's sent to the activity recipient when the rollback happens. Now in this version, we give the option to configure all the rollback message properties. That's the subject, the body, the email mode, and of course, most importantly, the recipient, because sometimes the default of sending the rollback message to, let's say, the IT team is not good enough for you. You want, let's say you have a budget and an activity in the budget process has been rolled back. You want the manager of the accounts to know about it. You want to control who the rollback message is sent to, and here we can do that. So let's take a look at this process, which we'll be looking at a little more closely later on with the one-click action feature. And let's take one of the activities, accounts update. And as you can see in the right pane, in the properties pane here, we have the rollback message property. Now I've already checked it here, which means that a rollback message will be sent if accounts update is rolled back. And here, if I click on the Advanced button, I can set exactly to whom the message about the rollback will be sent and exactly what will be sent. Now, normally, this is what you see when you open the screen. This is the default message. This is a template, and this is taken from the resource file. But if I click here, then I can edit exactly what will be sent and to whom it will be sent. I can add, for example, another recipient. Perhaps I'm going to choose to send it to a manager, and there I've added him. I can change the body of the message to include more information about the rollback, and I can, of course, change the subject and the email mode. Of course, if I want to, I can revert back to the default message from the resource file, which, by the way, you can also edit. You can edit the default message inside the resource file. Okay. I'll just add a recipient here. So again, we've given you a little more control on what happens when something unexpected occurs during the execution of your process. Next up, Sequence is constantly expanding its configuration options, including how information is displayed to the user. And as part of this effort, this version enables you to select the column by which combo box or option group values are sorted and displayed. So let's take a look at an example of that. Let's add a new form to this process. Call it escalation. Here, by the way, I just want to add also new in this version, or slightly different in this version. If I were to add a new form based on an existing form, then the selection of the existing form has improved a little bit. Here, you navigate to find the form that you would like to duplicate by first selecting the workflow space that it's in, then selecting the workflow itself, and then selecting the form which you'd like to duplicate. So that's a new selection for the duplicate an existing form and use an existing form, which is slightly different in this version. Here we're going to create a new form. Okay, and now I'm going to add an option group field to this form, and I'm going to base it on a table of values which I've already created for the purpose of this webinar called severity. Severity would be an indication of the severity of the request, and the values that are already in the table are high, medium, and low severity. Now the alphabetical order of that would be high, low, medium, but what if I want to display high, medium, low, which is the logical order, and also the order in which I entered the values into the table? So here, this is the new feature, which enables you to sort the combo box or the option group according to the column. Now by default, it goes according to the table display field. I can select FLDID and change that to sort it according to FLDID, in which case we have high, medium, and low instead of high, low, medium. So there again, we've given you just a little bit more control on how to display values in your forms. And I want to mention that you can use this again for the option group, a regular combo, and advanced combo. In SP combo, you can control the order using the order by command in the SQL procedure. Okay, we're going to take a quick break for questions. Shlomo, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do.
Muted.
Yes, we do. Just 1 second. I'll field a few quick ones. The resource files that we mentioned before are in the sequence shared resources folder, and there is one for each language that you have installed. There are the 6 defaults and whichever custom resource files that you create. In 2 words, because we're digressing here, the rollback best practice for how to use it, it should be minimal use. The rollback functionality is cool, it works, it'll inform people, but it should be used minimalistically, and the messages, in this case, also function as a log for what was rolled back, so that you'll have at least a form of record of what changes were made. And lastly, one quick question. Ellie demonstrated using existing UTCMV tables, content tables for that, for the radio button, or you can use them for combo boxes and the likes. It's good for preventing duplication. You know, you have all the information in one place, but you should use with care and educate the users, the workflow developers, so that they don't override each other by mistake. Those were all the questions that we have, and Ellie, you're unmuted. Continue.
Okay, thanks a lot, Shlomo. Okay, the next feature, we've added 2 expressions in this version. Sequence includes a very powerful expressions engine, and sequence expressions are lambda-based and canonical. In this version, we have 2 new expressions which will make your life easier. They are, at first, workflow.workflowAlias, which retrieves the workflow alias, and also task.completed@, which retrieves the completion date of a task. And we're going to see an example of both those right now. For example, if I take this activity manager approval, it's a task, and I go to its message. Now in the message body, let's say I want to tell this manager what this message, where this message is coming from which workflow it is coming from. So here in the body, I'm going to open up the expressions wizard. I'm going to edit the body of the message right here and say from the, and then here go to metadata, workflow alias process. Okay, that's the new expression enabling you to provide information about the workflow inside the message or anywhere where you have the expressions wizard in sequence, including default values and the like. The second expression we're going to see also inside this manager approval activity is the completed@, the completion date of a task. And let's set the date field here of this activity to the completion date of a previous task. We're going to go here to the default value, open up the expressions wizard. We're going to take this task, inventory check, open up the metadata, open up this activity's tasks, and in the task view, we are going to return completed@. Okay? Let's just validate that and update. So now the date field in this form will take the default value of the completion date of a previous task. So again, 2 additional expressions to be added to our very powerful expressions engine. Next up, workflow validation. Now this is a very practical feature which helps you find errors and build correctly functioning workflows. For those of you who are .NET programmers, this is something like a .NET compiler. Now it's very important to validate your workflow during the development stage instead of when you've completed your development or during testing. Because if you validate your workflow while you're building it, it will save you a lot of time later on. Instead of discovering all the errors later on and having a mess, you're going to be able to deal with them one by one as you build your workflow. So that means it's also an important tool for change management. Now, workflow validation phase 1 was released in version 6.3.2 of Sequence, and it already included validation checks and feedback about your workflow's validity. In this version, 6.4, we have workflow validation phase 2, and that includes additional checks which provide full validation coverage. Now, for example, I've built a process which has several errors, and if I click validate, we're going to see some of the new messages, some of the new validation messages which have been added to this version. First off, no permissions are defined for this workflow. That's a new message. I neglected to add permissions to the workflow or its activities. There is more than one connection between this activity and end. The director approval activity, I've accidentally connected it twice to the end activity, and that is an error. We have, in the director approval, which is a task, we have the recipient Evan Jameson references an inactive user because I've defined the recipient of this task as Evan Jameson, and then I went ahead and deleted Evan Jameson, so I get a warning for that. Finally, we have the if-else activity has an output connection which is not set to success or failure. And as you can see, here's the if-else activity. And as you usually see, we have success or failure in green or red. Here we have gray arrows, which means that I have not set the output connections of this if-else activity to success or failure. Now, those aren't all the messages. Those are some of them. If you'd like to see all the new messages, then you are welcome to take a look at the version 6.4 release notes, which include them all in the appendix. Please note that workflow properties, variable, and quick search are not part of the scope of this feature yet. And finally, I want to add that you should use validation wisely. Don't rely on it to develop your workflow, and it doesn't replace best practices for developing workflows. So you use it as an aid, but not as a crutch. Next up, copy-paste activity. Time to solution is of key importance in a BPM project. Validation was one feature which helps you save time. Copy-paste is another. We're going to take a look again at our original process here, not the one with all the errors. And I'm going to demonstrate how we can copy and paste activities quite easily in this version. The first activity I'd like to copy and paste is a web service consumer. I click on it, right-click, click Copy. Now click anywhere on the canvas, right-click, and click Paste. Now as we're waiting, we're getting data tables generated in the sequence database, and we've copied the web check activity, and we have a copy of it, Consumer 1, which of course we can give a new name to. But we've saved ourselves time because it took us time to set up this web service consumer, and if we needed something very similar, we can just easily copy and paste it like that. The second example I'd like to show you is copying and pasting a task. Manager approval, right-click, copy, and paste. And here we get a window which asks us exactly how to do the copy. Would we like to copy the form, which means that we're going to actually make a duplication of the original form in that task and create a whole new one in this basically duplicated activity, or do not copy the form and use the same form as in the original task? And there is the copied task, and there again we've saved time on defining the message details on the original task, a time saver. The final part of this feature I'd like to show you is copying and pasting a flow activity. Here we have a switch, destination, right-click, copy, and let's paste it now. 1 second. And here also we get a question, would we like to copy the flow activity with or without the links? Now if we copy the links, let's take a look at what happens. We get a new switch, and the output links are pointing to the same activities as the old switch was. If I had chosen the other option, we'd get a copied switch without these links. Since I don't really want to have the links interfering with my workflow right now, I am going to delete this one. So there again, the copy-paste activity, it'll save you time, which is of key importance in your BPM project. Final note about copy-paste, you can currently copy and paste activities within the same workflow. Okay, next up, a very practical feature, source control management. Now, Sequence is designed as a multi-user development environment. That means a team of developers are working in concert on the same process or group of processes. Now, a source control engine facilitates this, but in order to ease source control for a team of developers, we've created a source control management screen in this version that will enable developers to check in and check out or undo multiple items all from one interface. And let's take a look at it, not here, but from a third process that I have here, which has several activities checked out to different developers. Here, if I click on, in the Actions menu, if I click on Source Control, then we see all the activities of this process, and we see for each one who's checked that activity out or in. We've got the administrator, Ruth, Adam, John, and Ruth again. And each developer can control if he wants to check in or check out the activity that he's working on. If you're a global administrator, you can also force check in or check out on behalf of an employee who's, let's say, had an unexpected leave. You can take over there and check in or check out his activities. Let's do an example. John Smith, let's say he's out for a week and we need to check in his activity, internal audit. We'll click on it and click check in. Get a warning there because I'm not John Smith, but I know what I'm doing. I click OK, and there it is, checked in. And you can choose multiple activities here and perform actions on them. So here, let's say I want to check all of these in. Here you can add a label or a description for each check-in, and then now they're checked in. You can also use undo pending changes. For example, if you have an activity which is checked out, but you want to undo the changes that you performed on it, if you click on the activity and then undo pending changes, are you sure you want to undo them? Yes. And then it gets checked in. Well, this one's checked out to Adam Green, it appears. Let's try a different one. Let's check this in for Adam and then check out the activity. Okay, now if I were to make a change on the if-else activity, but then I don't want to keep that change, I would do undo pending changes, and it goes back to the previous version. So here you have a very convenient and powerful source control management interface for the activities of the process. Now, you can apply source control actions on behalf of another user only if you are a global administrator. Okay, Shlomo, let's take another break for questions.
In this round, there was just one quick clarification. Again, over here with sharing tables, this becomes even more acute. It's more commonly used for simplicity's sake when you're building your workflow with an eye towards reporting. You want to use a minimum amount of tables. The more tables you use, the more inner joins, the more complicated it gets. So yes, it's a good idea to consider sharing tables when you're using similar activities with a high amount of shared data saved. But you should consider again changes that you make, how you manage them, so that people are aware of each other and are aware of who they're sharing with. And that's it.
Thank you, Shlomo. Okay, so just to sum up what we've seen already through now, we've taken a look at SharePoint 2010 support on the sequence runtime. We've seen how you can control the rollback message configuration, how you can control the display values on a combo box or in an option group. We've seen 2 new expressions. We've taken a look at several more validation messages when you validate your workflow. We've seen the quick but powerful copy-paste activity, a real time saver. And we've taken a look at the new source control management screen, which helps a team of developers manage the source control on the process. So that means that we've come to our top build highlight feature of this webinar, one-click action mobile support. Now, this is a feature which has really started to create a buzz because here we are in the age of mobile internet connectivity. Everyone's connected everywhere they are by their mobiles, by their laptops, and employees are expected to be able to work from anywhere, and they're also expected to work from anywhere. So PNM Soft is very proud to present one-click action mobile support phase 1, which enables end users to complete their tasks from their mobile device or PC wherever they are. Now, this feature can greatly improve process performance by simplifying and expediting task completion for managers and end users on the go. This feature, we're going to take a look initially right now. Now, because we're doing the webinar, you actually can't see me doing this feature, but I will show you what it looks like for an end user. Now, this is me holding, I'll just pause the screen there. This is me holding an iPhone, and I've gotten an email message with a task to my iPhone. It's a task like any task in Sequence. It's been one-click action enabled, and I've received it, and I get this message from Sequence. Let's even go back right to the beginning. You'll see how I get it into my inbox. Okay, there it is in my inbox. I click on it. It's from Sequence. Open it up. It's the approve employer request. I'm the manager of this employee, and I've been asked to approve the request for an expense. And now I can either approve or decline that request. Let's take a look. If the resolution isn't good enough there for you, let's take a look at what it looks like here. We've got it's sent from Sequence, the subject, approve employee request, a caution, and we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this right now, actually, because it's quite important. If I forward this message to anyone else, then that person who gets the email can complete this task on my behalf. So use this new feature with caution. Jason Marks has requested an expense valued at $530, approve or decline. So here I click approve or decline. And once I do that, the task gets completed. Now, what does that mean? The task gets completed. What about all the fields in the task? Who fills them out? I'm just clicking a link here, who fills them out. So what happens behind the scenes is when I click approve or decline, these are actions which have been predefined by the Sequence developer so that when I click one of these, then the fields of the task are populated behind the scenes. All I had to do was do one click, but the fields were populated because that has been pre-configured. Now let's take a look at exactly how we configure the task to be one-click enabled and how we define those actions. There, I've just clicked it, and I get your request has been submitted successfully. So that's what it looks like for the end user. And again, one email to the end user's mobile or PC, a link to click, and the task is completed, which will save a lot of time for an end user or manager who is in the field. Now let's take a look at how the Sequence developer configures this feature. So this is the process we're talking about. It's an expense request, and if it's over a certain amount, that's the if condition, it goes for approval to the manager. Now you'll notice that in the properties frame, we have one-click action as a property. It's enabled, so you got to check it. And here, when you click on advanced, you're going to define the actions which appear in that email for that manager. I've already defined the first action, decline, but now we're going to define the approve action together. That's the name. And in addition, we need to now add the assignments of this approve action, how the form fields of this task are going to be populated when the manager clicks approve. So first of all, let's add the name of the manager. Now let's add the date. And let's add that he has approved this expense request. Okay. And finally, something that we recommend that you add, you don't have to, but it's recommended. We have a text box inside this task which indicates if the task has been completed using one click or not, or in the sequence runtime. The OCA indication field which we've added. So here we're just going to add text which says this task has been completed using one click action. And that indicates how the task was completed for troubleshooting later on. Click OK, and now as you can see we've added the approve action, so now they both appear in that email that the manager gets. Link expiration defines the days from the time the email was sent after which the links will expire. Because you don't necessarily want these links to live forever, because this is somewhat of a sensitive feature. You don't want to use it for major budgets, for example, because the message could be forwarded to someone else. But here also, the link expiration, you can define how long you want the links to function. Okay. Any questions on the configuration there of the one-click action?
Hi, Ellie. Yes, I had a few questions. So just to quickly go over them, the one-click action is not enabled by default in activities, in either previously created or newly created activities. You have to go in. It was, of course, activated over here because this was prepared for the demonstration. If you'd like to see the full promotional, the clip is available on YouTube, and we have an ongoing bet, so the more the merrier. And lastly, the expiration. The expiration for the link is usually a function of how long you expect the particular recipient or recipients to require it. In other words, typically you would use this for people that are on the road that are replying from a mobile device of some kind. So if a person will typically get to a computer once every whatever, at most 4 or 5 days, then you would create an expiration a little bit above that, to make sure that that they can use the link, but that it doesn't stay alive for longer than it should. That's pretty much it.
Okay, so just to sum up on one-click action, it's a feature which will cut down on bottlenecks, improve performance on processes, because it enables your end users to complete tasks quickly and from remote. Okay, finally we got two advanced features. The first one is external files deployment. This version gives you more control over external files and database objects during deployment. Now, while you're importing a process, the external objects list is now saved. And if you don't want to save the list, you can deselect the checkbox for these items. We'll take a look at that right now. And in this version, the workflow import wizard includes options to manage the way files are treated on import. Let's take a look at that right now by going to version management. Now, I've already created a package previously before the webinar of this workflow. Now let's import it as a duplicate workflow. Click Next. And here, with the package, there's also some external file objects, and I can determine here how they're imported. Let's say one of the objects here is getDate.js. Let's say I also have the same file in the same location in this environment. I can determine whether to overwrite the file that I have here or whether to keep it, whether basically to skip it and not overwrite it, use the one that I have here. You have the same option on database objects, and in addition, the list of your external objects will be saved after the deployment. You won't lose it. So you have it here. We have two external objects. So this just gives you a little more control over how you import the objects that are connected to your workflow during deployment. The second advanced feature is creating a custom resource file and being able to continue to use it after upgrading to new versions of Sequence. Now, your resource file is a file which contains all your text for the Sequence runtime. And this is the text which is displayed in the runtime user interface. You can create a custom resource file. Now I'm going here to the directory where the resource files are stored. Here it is. This is the default resource file that's normally used. I basically just copied it like this, and I've renamed it with this name, custom resource file, and then I've edited it with different values which I want to appear in the Sequence runtime. Let's take a look at what I've changed. When a workflow is completed, normally the message that you see in the Sequence runtime is the current workflow has been successfully completed. Since I'm Canadian, and Canadians are known for being polite, I've added thank you. Now that's great that we've created the custom resource file, but how do we tell Sequence to use this file? Well, we go to the web config file of the runtime, and we point the web config to the custom resource file which we have created, telling it to use that file instead. Now, as we wait for it to open, the importance of this feature is that when you upgrade to a new version of Sequence, you can hold on to the same custom resource file, so you won't lose your changes. Now here we are in the web config file of the runtime, and in this tag, the resources resx files location tag, we have first of all the path to the resource files, and then here we have the name of our custom resource file. So now we're pointing to it. Let's take a look at the runtime. We'll run this process. And see that the change has taken effect. Thank you very much. Okay, so that sums up the two advanced features. And to sum up in general here, we've gotten to know the Sequence 6.4 new features, which give you more control, they give you more configuration capabilities, and they make your process development simpler and faster. Now, whether it's something simple like copy-paste activity, which is going to cut down your time to solution, whether it's rollback message configuration, which ensures that the right person, the right stakeholder is notified about an unexpected event, or whether it's one-click action, which is going to enable your end users to complete their tasks by remote at the click of a link, Sequence is the BPM solution which is tuned to your process needs. Well, that wraps up today's webinar. Thank you once again for joining us. I want to encourage you to keep asking questions, to take a look at the new features in the release notes as well, and to watch the one-click action trailer, which I wanted to show you just now. Let's just see if we can take a quick look at it. You can watch it from our website right over here. There it is. Thank you very much for taking part in this webinar, and we look forward to joining you next time.